My brother-in-law installed tracking on my 16-year-old daughter's phone, and then he tried to box us in inside a mall parking garage, like we weren't people, just a family issue he had the right to solve with force. And the grossest part? Not that he did it. The grossest part was my husband calling me paranoid at first. Because if danger walks into your house with a smile, the words "we're family" and a pie for dessert, then it's not danger, right? It's just a rough patch. We lived in the suburbs outside Philadelphia, one of those neighborhoods with a starter home we bought for the future, a postage stamp yard, and a lawn that looked way too perfect for real life. The kind of street where neighbors smile the same smile and close their doors the same way. I'm Amanda. My husband is Rob. Our daughter is Emily. Emily used to be my talker. She'd walk into the kitchen and in 60 seconds flat, I'd get how Ms. Peterson mixed up names again, how the school hallway smelled like chlorine, how Jess, her best friend, was fighting with her boyfriend, how someone fell asleep face first in their notebook during history. All I had to do was nod, refill my coffee, and feel like I actually lived inside my kid's life. And then she went quiet. Not teenage quiet. Not "I'm mad at the universe" quiet. Different. Her silence got heavy, dense, the kind that sits in the air and makes your skin itch. One morning I saw her in the kitchen, hair thrown up in a messy tie, eyes not quite on me, dark circles so bad I wanted to blame the school system, society, and capitalism just for variety. She grabbed a piece of toast and stared at it like the toast had personally offended her. "Did you sleep okay?" I asked. "Yeah." Too fast. Too flat. She glanced at her phone and I saw her cheek twitch. 1 second, then gone. But I noticed that second. What's going on?" "Nothing, Mom. I'm late. PE first period." She snatched her backpack and slipped out the door, and I stood there with my half-drunk coffee and that awful feeling like somebody left a window open in your brain and a cold draft is crawling straight through your nerves. A couple days later, Ms. Karen Peterson called, the teacher who had Emily in homeroom. "I don't want to scare you," she said, "but Emily's changed. Her grades dropped fast, she's missing assignments, she sits by herself. I tried to talk to her and she shuts down. I just think you should know." Those calls are the worst because nobody says the scary part out loud. They say changed, shuts down, I think. And what you hear is, your kid is sinking and you haven't even noticed yet. I thanked her, hung up, and went looking for Rob. Rob came home exhausted, like always. He's a construction supervisor, hard hat, concrete, schedules, and a never-ending parade of the timeline moved. "Rob," I said, "the school called. Emily's having problems." He didn't even look up from his phone. "Amanda, she's a teenager. That's normal." Normal is locking herself in her room. Normal is flinching at notifications. "You're spiraling. She just wants space. Stop hovering." He said it like teenagers were an IKEA manual. Step 1, don't touch it. Step 2, wait. Step 3, it'll fix itself. "I'm not hovering," I snapped. "I can feel something's wrong." "You can feel everything," he cut in. "You're sensitive." He said sensitive like it was a diagnosis that let him opt out of reality. Because if the problem is me, he doesn't have to look the truth in the face. And right around then, Tyler started showing up at our house. Rob's younger brother, freshly divorced. He's having a hard time. He needs support. He's family. Tyler was the kind of man who could look wounded on command, just wounded enough to get sympathy. Sad eyes, soft voice, tragic story, and always, too much presence. At first he stopped by for coffee, then he stayed for dinner. Then he developed this cute little habit of showing up without warning. One day, I walked into the kitchen and saw an open bottle of bourbon on the table. My bourbon, the one I kept for a special occasion, because sometimes grown adults want to pretend they're in control of their lives. "Oh, hey, Amanda," Tyler smiled. "Rob said you wouldn't mind." Of course. I'm a woman. I'm automatically fine with things I wasn't asked about. Rob came in behind him, cheerful. "Tyler needs a distraction," he said. "We're not monsters." There it was. If you object, you're a monster. Emily came downstairs for dinner, saw Tyler, and froze in the doorway. Her whole body went tight enough that even I could see it. "Hi," she said quietly. "Hey, sweetheart," Tyler replied, way too warmly. "How's school?" Emily didn't answer. She sat, picked up her fork, like she was giving herself an order. Just survive this evening. "Put your phone away," Rob said. "That's rude." Emily did it, and her face got even whiter. I watched her and thought, this isn't about manners. This is about safety. And Rob was the guy asking you to close a window while the house is on fire. That night, I went upstairs to check on Emily. I tried the doorknob. Locked. I knocked. "Em? Everything okay?" A pause. "Yeah. Night, Mom." I stood in the hallway trying to talk myself into teenage phase. But a mother's instinct is not hygienic. You can't switch it off. And the thought that came next made me want to bleach my brain. Emily isn't locking the door because of me. Emily is locking the door because of someone in this house. Tyler became part of our daily life so fast it was like he had a key. And honestly, I wouldn't have been shocked if he did. He brought groceries on his way. He took out the trash. He talked about how Sarah, his ex, ruined his life. And every story ended the exact same way, like a chorus in a bad song. "You're my only family." Rob melted every time. Because Rob was raised on this idea that a man keeps the family together. And apparently, in his head, family included a grown man with no concept of boundaries. One day, Tyler came by in the middle of the day when Rob was out on site. I was working from home. My spreadsheet was on fire, and I was not emotionally prepared for surprise therapy hour. Tyler walked into the kitchen like he lived there, poured himself water, and looked around like he was checking inventory. "Hey," he said finally. "Rob told me Emily's laptop's lagging. Let me take a look. I know my stuff." Something in me clenched. "No, if it's acting up, we'll take it to a shop." He smiled. "That's money down the drain. I'm not some stranger. I'll do it for free. Family." And that's where the American horror movie starts, the one they turn into a streaming documentary. Because family is the most dangerous currency on earth. You pay with your safety and you never get change back. I called Rob, hoping he'd say no. Rob said, "Sure, let him look. He knows tech." So I handed Tyler Emily's laptop. Because sometimes the scariest person in the family isn't the one who shows up. It's the one who opens the door and says, "It's fine." After that, Emily got quieter. And every time her phone buzzed, her fingers twitched. I tried to catch a moment when Tyler wasn't hovering. He had this sick, perfect timing. He appeared exactly when I needed to talk to my kid. One morning I saw Emily on the stairs. She was gripping her phone like it might bite. "Emily, look at me." She lifted her eyes, and I saw something that breaks adults. Contained fear. "Mom, I'm fine," she said automatically. "No, you're not. You're locking your door. You're not eating. You flinch at messages. I'm not going to pretend this is a phase. Tell me what's happening." She inhaled. Her lips trembled. And then the front door opened. "Good morning," Tyler called, bright and cheerful. "Oh, you're both home. Perfect." Emily took a step back like someone shoved her. I I'm going upstairs, she whispered, and she vanished. Tyler watched her go, then turned to me. Tough age, he said. You just need patience. He said it like I was a clueless mom, and he was the wise expert on other people's kids. I snapped. Tyler, why are you here all the time, without calling, without warning? For 1 second, his face went cold. Then the smile snapped back into place. Amanda, do you really think I'm in the way? I'm just trying to help. Rob's stressed. Emily's stressed. I can tell. I want things to be calm for you guys. Calm. He said that word like calm was something he would grant us if we behaved. Later, I tried Rob again. Rob, your brother is acting weird. Emily is scared of him. Rob sighed like I'd suggested we adopt a llama. Amanda, Emily just hates when adults interfere. Tyler's trying to connect. He's a good guy. A good guy doesn't show up uninvited and look at our daughter like she owes him something. Rob frowned. You're reaching. He's my brother. He's not okay right now. And what about Emily, Rob? Is she okay? He went quiet, and I realized it was easier for him to pity a grown man than admit something terrifying was happening to his daughter, because admitting it meant acting. Acting meant conflict. Conflict meant facing the fact that family isn't always a holy word. One evening, I heard Emily's voice through her door, quiet, shaky. She was on the phone. Jess, I can't. She whispered. I'm scared. No, I can't tell my dad. He won't believe me. He'll say I'm being dramatic. My throat tightened. I knocked. Emily? Silence. Em, open up. It's me. The lock clicked. The door cracked open. Emily stood there, phone hidden behind her back, eyes red. Mom, please, don't make me talk, she whispered. I could have done the right thing, gentle, calm, no pressure. But rage rose up in me. I'm not making you, I said. I'm asking, because I'm your mom, and I'm watching you disappear right in front of me. She trembled. I don't want Dad to hate you because of me. That line hit like a fist to the ribs, because it was possible, because it had already existed in our house, just wearing different words. I sat down beside her and took her hand. Emily, if someone is hurting you, it's not because of you. It's because of them. And Dad, he can be wrong, but he has to hear the truth. She opened her mouth to say more, and then Tyler's voice floated up from downstairs. Emily, come down here. I brought your favorite snacks. Emily flinched, and I knew it. This wasn't a rough patch. We had a predator in our home. We'd been promising to shop for her homecoming dress forever. We postponed twice. Every time Emily said, it's fine, later. But I could tell she was clinging to that day like a tiny breath of normal. Saturday morning, I said, today, just you and me. Emily nodded too fast, like she was afraid I'd change my mind. We picked a big mall, the kind where you can buy everything in one trip and where crowds make you feel invisible. I told myself, with people around, she'll feel safer. Naive of me. There was no parking outside, so I drove into the garage. A concrete maze where every footstep echoes and the lighting makes everybody look gray. Emily sat with her phone in her hands, eyes darting over mirrors and lanes. You sure you want this place? I asked. Yeah, she said. It's okay. Her okay had become code for I'm holding it together with duct tape. Inside, under bright lights and noise, she actually loosened up. We even smiled. We ate fries in the food court, and for the first time in weeks, she told me something about school, short but real. I almost believed we were okay. Almost. Then she froze. Mom. Her voice went small. I thought I saw... I followed her gaze. A reflection in glass. A male figure. I turned fast. People, bags, noise. No one familiar. It was nothing, I said, way too confidently. He's at home. I said it like confidence could replace safety. Mistake number 1,000. We went into her favorite store. Music pretending life is easy. Employees smiling like their paychecks depend on your happiness. Maybe they did. Emily chose a navy dress. Beautiful. Simple. The kind of dress that says, I'm growing up, but I'm not auditioning for anyone's approval. I'm going to try it on, she said, and disappeared behind the curtain. I stood by the rack, flipping hangers, when the curtain snapped open. Emily stepped out pale, phone trembling in her hand. Mom? I looked at the screen. A message from Tyler. Navy blue looks amazing on you. Very elegant. Something inside me clicked off. The lights went out. Cold clarity moved in. We're leaving, I said. But the dress. We'll buy it. Now. Go. I barely remember paying. I just remember gripping her hand and pulling her through the crowd like the crowd might turn into water and drown us. Elevator down, parking level, concrete air. And then Emily said, Mom, turn your phone off. Right now. Mine too. What? Please, turn it off. He'll find us. I shut mine down. Emily killed hers too, hands shaking, screen going black. Quiet for 1 second, like we'd slammed a door on something. It was probably too late though. If he already had our last ping, the damage was done. We reached the car and Emily finally spoke. Fast, whispering, like the walls were listening. He put something on my laptop, she said. And then he had me install it on my phone too. Parental controls like protection from bad websites. He said Dad knew. And then he started messaging me from different accounts. On Instagram, sometimes just hi, sometimes threats. He sent photos outside my school, photos of our house. He wrote that he always knows where I am, and if I tell anyone, nobody will believe me, especially Dad. Rage rose so hard I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. Not there. Not now. Emily, I said quietly, you didn't do anything wrong. Do you understand me? She nodded, tears glassy in her eyes. And that's when I saw Tyler. He stood near a concrete pillar, maybe 100 feet away, phone in his hand, waving it slightly, like he was catching a signal. Then he lifted his head and looked straight at us. Found us. He walked toward the car slowly, calmly, confident, like a man who's always been given what he wants. Mom, Emily whispered. Please. I started the engine. The sound bounced off the concrete. Tyler sped up. I locked the doors. He was right there. He knocked on the window. His smile was stretched thin and mean. Open up. Let's talk. I threw the car into reverse. He stepped in front of the car and spread his arms like it was some dramatic "stop you misunderstood" scene. Only in our movie there was no soundtrack. Just concrete. And fear. Amanda! He yelled. Don't do this. We're family. Family? Sure. Family. The universal hall pass to ignore boundaries. I cut the wheel and shot into the next lane. Tires squealed. He ran beside the car and slapped the door. Emily screamed. I didn't even catch the words, just sound. In the mirror, I saw him sprinting for his car. He followed. At the exit, he tried to cut me off. Too close, too aggressive. I burst onto the street and, for the first time all day, I was grateful for chaos. Chaos makes it harder for predators. He still stayed on us. At one intersection, he tried to surge ahead and stop sideways. I jerked onto another road, one with people and cameras. I pulled into the parking lot of a roadside diner. Bright lights, big windows, strangers everywhere. Emily was crying with her hand over her mouth like she was afraid someone would hear. I turned my phone back on. Notifications hit like an avalanche. Missed calls from Rob, messages from unknown accounts, and one new text from Tyler, bold now. Don't do anything stupid. I just want to talk. I dialed 911. I kept my voice calm because panic doesn't help, and dispatch needs facts. Stalking, threats, a vehicle chase, attempted blocking, a minor involved, suspected digital tracking. Then I called Rob.
"Where are you?"
he demanded immediately. "Tyler called. He said you two had a fight." I inhaled. "Rob, your brother is stalking Emily. He's tracking her. He installed something. He chased us. Tried to box us in. I called the police." A pause. Heavy. Sticky. "Amanda, maybe you misunderstood," Rob said. "Tyler, he's just worried." I started shaking. "Rob, do you hear yourself? Worried is crying on a couch. Worried is not texting Navy looks great on you while standing outside the fitting room." Silence. "Emily will tell you everything," I said. "If you give her a chance and don't jump to defending family." I heard him swallow. "I'm coming," he said. "Text me the address." When Rob arrived, he looked into the car and saw Emily's face, and I watched his world crack. He opened the passenger door, dropped to a crouch, and hugged his daughter. "I'm sorry, Em," he whispered. "I'm sorry. I was an idiot." Sometimes, "I'm sorry" sounds like a person waking up. I just wish it didn't take a nightmare. The patrol car showed up fast. Tyler, of course, was gone. Men like that disappear like shadows. They don't want reality. They want control. The officer took a basic report and told us to come to the precinct to file a formal statement. It wasn't the moment where the system rushes in to save you. It was the moment where the system says, "We need paperwork." The next day we sat on plastic chairs under a buzzing AC vent. Emily looked gray with exhaustion. Rob was tight as wire. I felt like I was being asked to prove I was drowning before anyone would throw a rope. At first the detective listened with that family drama face. "Any physical harm?" he asked. "No," I said. "But there are threats. Tracking. A vehicle chase. Messages." He nodded like it wasn't ideal. And then Emily pulled out her phone, opened the thread, showed him. The dress message. Screenshots. Photos outside her school. Photos of our house. Lines that made my fingers go cold. "I know where you are. And don't get smart." The detective's face changed. The boredom left. The focus arrived. Rob finally said what he should have said weeks earlier. "He's my brother," Rob said. "And, yeah, he was at our house a lot. I let him. I thought he just needed support. But this isn't normal." He crossed a line. Sometimes, for the system to take it seriously, someone with authority has to confirm it's real. And in families, authority often means the man. It made me angry, but I used it. The detective gave us instructions. Save everything, don't delete, make copies, turn on two-factor authentication, secure accounts, don't respond to Tyler if he reaches out. He spoke like someone who's seen what "let's just talk" turns into. They called Tyler in for an interview. He denied everything, said I was hysterical, said Emily was manipulating, said he was just trying to help. And the nastiest part? He said it in the same soft tone he used when he talked about being our only family. They let him go. For now. Those days were the worst. Because he knew we'd gone to the police. And people like him hate it when their toys find a voice. We changed the locks. Rob installed cameras by the front door. I drove Emily to school and picked her up like we lived in a war zone instead of a cul-de-sac with holiday wreaths and live, laugh, love signs. Emily jumped at every notification, even on a brand new phone. Because fear doesn't update just because you upgraded the hardware. A few days later, the detective called.
"We got a search warrant,"
he said, and I exhaled like I'd been holding my breath since the moment Emily first went quiet. When they pulled Tyler's devices, everything got worse. And, at the same time, everything finally made sense to the system. Worse, because there was so much. Better, because now it wasn't a worried mom and a family misunderstanding. It was evidence. They found the tracking software. They found hundreds of photos. They found a file. His little journal. Roots. My work hours. Emily's schedule, and the floor plan of our house pulled from the builder's website, with notes, actual notes, about who slept where. I sat at my kitchen table staring at that list and realized, if we'd waited another month... No, I'm not even finishing that thought. That's when Tyler got arrested for real. The court issued an emergency no-contact order, not please don't, not let's be civil, a real, enforceable, stay away and shut up. No, I was just driving by. No, I just wanted to talk. No, but we're family. Rob looked like someone had smashed his entire identity and handed it back in pieces. He met with attorneys, answered questions, signed paperwork, and every night he came home quieter, older, more hollow. One night he sat on the edge of our bed and said, "I let him in. I actually let him in." And I didn't rush to comfort him. Not because I'm cruel, because sometimes a person needs to feel the weight of what they did so they never do it again. A week later, I booked family therapy with Dr. Julia Bennett. Rob tried to resist. "We can handle this ourselves." "We already handled it ourselves," I told him, "all the way to tracking and a car chase. Now we handle it like adults." The first session was awful. I talked about fear and rage. Emily stared at the carpet like the carpet was safer than any adult in the room, and then Rob said, staring at his hands, "I called Amanda paranoid, and she saw it. She saw it early. I just wanted it to be simple. I wanted it to be a family issue that blows over. Because if I admit my brother is dangerous, that means I've been wrong for a long time." Dr. Bennett's voice was calm, not gentle. Calm like a scalpel. "Being wrong isn't the danger," she said. "Staying wrong after you've seen the damage. That's the danger." Emily finally lifted her eyes. "I stayed quiet," she said softly, "because I thought Dad would believe Tyler. Dad always believed Tyler." Rob covered his face with his hands. And that wasn't the ending. That was the beginning. Spring in the suburbs smells like wet dirt and someone else's barbecue. We were driving, and Emily sat beside me, quiet, but not the scary kind of quiet. This was rebuilding. "How was your session?" I asked. "Okay," she said, and she smiled. "I'm learning how to say no without feeling guilty. Apparently it's a skill, not a personality trait." We all changed. The district attorney's office didn't do the whole primetime courtroom drama with a jury. The case moved through an agreement that mattered more than a spectacle. Tyler got a court-ordered psychiatric evaluation, mandatory treatment, strict supervision, and the no-contact order stayed in place. No closeness, no messages, no, "I miss you," no, "let's just talk." He moved to another city with distant relatives, and honestly, that distance was better than any version of justice I'd imagined. Rob sometimes texts from the grocery store. "Should I buy chicken I'll burn, or should I just grab charcoal and save time?" Emily laughs, and her laugh is the only victory I care about. We pulled up to that same mall, and I noticed my heart wasn't pounding. It was just beating, like it's supposed to. "Today, no garage," I said. "Obviously," Emily replied. I don't have to prove I'm brave by walking into traps. We got out, and she took my hand first. "Mom," she said quietly, "thank you for believing me. Right away. Well, almost right away. But you believed me." I swallowed. "I should have done it sooner," I admitted. "I should have ripped him out of our house the day I saw your face change around him." "You did rip him out," Emily said. "That's what matters." We walked inside. Bright lights, noise, normal life. And I kept thinking about the scariest part of all of this. Not the chase, not the tracking. The fact that my child stayed silent for months because she was sure her own father would say, "We're family first." And only after that, "I believe you." Now, the order is different. And that is the only thing in this story I'll call actual salvation. Thanks for spending your time with me. If you want more stories like this, hit subscribe and give this video a like. And don't be shy, leave a comment. Your support means a lot. Take care, and I'll catch you in the next one.
Hi, Jennifer here. I've got a new story for you today. It has got this protective parent vibe all the way through. It's about boundaries, respect, and choosing what really matters. Let's listen.
At Thanksgiving, my mother-in-law looked at my 18-year-old daughter and calmly said, "We all decided that you're no longer family." Then she was made to leave and spend Thanksgiving alone in her car. The next morning, the family lawyer called us in a panic because I got home late on Thanksgiving expecting the kind of quiet that feels earned. My husband Matt was working a holiday shift at the hospital, and our daughter Pamela had gone to his parents' house the way she usually did when he got pulled in. After the ugly dinner the week before, Teresa had called and said she did not want misunderstandings to ruin the holiday. Pamela thought maybe they had calmed down. I was not sure they had, but I also did not think they would do anything unforgivable with a holiday table already set. I even remember thinking she would probably sleep over there and come back after brunch the next day. I let myself into a dark kitchen with my purse sliding off my shoulder, already thinking about leftovers and whether I had the energy to wash my hair before bed. The house should have been empty except for the dog and the refrigerator humming. Instead, the porch light was still on. One lamp glowed in the living room, and Pamela's car was sitting in the driveway with a fast food cup on the dashboard. That stopped me before I even got my keys back into my bag. Pamela never came home early from Teresa and William's place on Thanksgiving, not unless somebody was sick or there had been a schedule change. I remember standing there with one hand on the door, still assuming there had to be some ordinary explanation. By then, the ordinary part was already over. Pamela was on the couch in her coat, sitting so still she looked like someone waiting to be called into an office. No TV, no music, no phone in her hand, which told me more than tears would have. Our daughter was 18 and usually full of movement even when she was tired. She tapped her foot, flipped her hair, scrolled something, made a snack, did anything at all. That night she was staring at the coffee table like it had been interesting for hours. I said her name once, then again, and she looked up too fast, like I had pulled her back from somewhere she did not want to be. "Hey," I said, dropping my keys into the bowl by the door. "I thought you were still at Grandma's." She shrugged in a tiny, stiff way and said, "I came home." Even her voice sounded flattened out, like the night had already happened to her, and I was arriving too late to stop any of it. I didn't sit in the chair across from her. I sat right beside her and kept my coat on. Something had gone wrong long before I walked through the door. I asked the wrong practical question first because my brain was still reaching for a normal answer. I knew things had already been tense since the dinner the week before, but I still reached for something smaller than the truth. "Did you and Grandma get into it?" I said. "Did your car break down?" Pamela shook her head. She rubbed both hands over her knees once and said, without drama, "I spent Thanksgiving in my car." For a second, I honestly thought I had misheard her. "What does that mean?" I asked. "Like after dinner? Before dinner? Did you leave because it got weird?" She looked at me the way people do when you are accidentally being too hopeful for them. "No, Mom," she said. "I mean, I spent Thanksgiving in my car." I started building bad explanations anyway. Maybe there had been some argument and she cooled off outside. Maybe she drove around to avoid coming home upset. Maybe they said something stupid and she decided to leave before it got worse. I asked if she had gotten stuck somewhere, if there had been a flat tire, if she had called anyone. She kept shaking her head. Then she took a breath and said very clearly, "I didn't get stuck anywhere." That was when I understood I had not even found the right question yet. When I finally asked, "Pamela, did you leave or did somebody tell you to go?" She looked me right in the face and said, "They kicked me out." My whole body went cold. She didn't rush it after that. She gave it to me piece by piece, almost like she had replayed it so many times the words were lined up now. Teresa, my mother-in-law, had waited until plates were on the table and then said they needed to be honest about what the pregnancy meant for the family. Pamela said she stood there while Teresa looked at her and calmly said, "We all decided that you're no longer family." William stood right there beside her. Teresa's older sister Denise was there too. Nobody interrupted. Nobody said that was too far. And nobody even acted shocked enough to make it seem like Teresa had gone off script. Pamela said she asked what that meant, and Teresa told her she should leave, not call them, and stop calling them grandparents because that chapter was over. "Did your grandfather say anything?" I asked. "Did anybody?" Pamela shook her head once. "No," she said. That was the worst part. Everybody just stood there like it made sense. I stopped hearing the room around us after that. Something in me had gone very still. I put my arm around her and pulled her into me, and the first thing I heard myself ask was, "Did you eat?" It sounded small and stupid in the air, but shock does that. It sends you toward the thing you can fix with your hands, because the real thing is too big to hold yet. Pamela nodded and said she got takeout. "From where?" I asked anyway. She named a little Chinese place near the highway and said she sat in the parking lot for a while, then drove to the grocery store lot because it felt less obvious, then ate in the car with the heat running. "I didn't want to come home right away," she said. "I didn't want to walk in here like that." I stood up, went to the kitchen, and found the white paper bag in the trash. Her receipt was on top, time-stamped in the middle of Thanksgiving evening. One untouched packet of soy sauce had fallen beside it. I heated water for tea even though neither of us wanted tea. The fact that she had eaten alone in a parked car made the whole thing physical. They had not just rejected her, they had sent her out into the holiday to figure out the rest by herself. For a while she kept talking the way people do when they are trying not to fall apart. Clean sentences, no tears, all facts. Then I said, "They're angry and cruel, but this is not the end of anything." And that was when her control slipped. She pressed both hands against her mouth, then dropped them and said, "I thought they'd be mad at me. I knew that part." Her voice shook on the next words. "I just didn't think they'd act like the baby was something disgusting." She stared at the floor and kept going before I could answer. She said she had honestly believed that once the shock wore off, maybe Teresa and William would calm down. Maybe they would still want to know the baby. Maybe they would at least see a baby as a baby, not a punishment. Instead, they had acted like being pregnant erased her place in the family completely. "It's not even just me anymore," she said. "They rejected my child too." That was the sentence that finally broke her open. She folded toward me and cried in a hard, quiet way that made me hold the back of her neck like she was still 6 years old. That was the moment I knew this would not be something we talked around and moved past. I told her what I could tell her with absolute certainty. I said she was our daughter, and nothing she had told me changed that. I said Matt would back her too, and if he had been in that house, none of this would have happened the way it did. Pamela nodded, but she looked worn out past words. I walked her upstairs, waited until she shut her bedroom door, and then stood in the hallway staring at the wood grain like it might explain anything. At that point, I still thought my in-laws were being rigid, cruel, and obsessed with appearances. I thought this was about shame, old rules, and the kind of family pride people use like furniture they inherited and never chose. I cleaned the kitchen for no reason, slept badly, and woke up with that flat feeling you get after a disaster that has not finished unfolding. At 8:14 the next morning, my phone lit up with a name I had not expected to see on the day after Thanksgiving. Mr. Whitaker, the family lawyer. Later we learned his office had been contacted early that morning after questions were suddenly raised about Harriet's trust and whether Pamela's pregnancy triggered anything in it. At the time, all I knew was that Teresa had not sounded offended the night before. She had sounded prepared. I stared at the screen before I answered, and for the first time it hit me that Teresa had not sounded offended last night. She had sounded prepared. A few weeks before Thanksgiving, Pamela found me alone in the kitchen after school while I was putting groceries away. She did not circle the subject or ask whether I had a minute. She stood by the counter in her hoodie, gripping the strap of her backpack so hard her knuckles blanched, and said, fast, "Mom, I'm pregnant." Then she looked at me the way people look when they have already imagined 5 different versions of your disappointment. Pamela was 18, finishing high school, accepted to a good college, and she had spent half her senior year talking about becoming a teacher. We had been comparing dorm photos and arguing about whether she needed a mini fridge. Now all of that seemed to move 2 feet to the left in one sentence. I told her to sit down, mostly because I needed both of us sitting. She didn't. She said she had taken 2 tests, then a third one because she thought the first 2 had to be wrong. She was already far enough along that denial had become impossible, which made the whole conversation feel less like a scare and more like a future arriving before any of us were ready. The kitchen clock was so loud I noticed it. I remember taking a carton of eggs out of the bag and setting it right back down because suddenly I could not trust myself to hold anything breakable. My next words mattered, and Pamela knew it. Once she sat, the rest came out in bursts. The baby's father was Tyler, her first real boyfriend, also 18, sweet in the way boys sometimes are before life asks them to be anything difficult. He was supposed to leave for college in another state by late summer. Pamela had been accepted somewhere else. There had never been some grand plan for them to get married young and build a life in matching sweatshirts. "I know the timing is awful," she kept saying. And every time she said it, I nodded because she was right. But every time she talked about the pregnancy itself, she talked about the baby like someone real already existed on the other side of all our fear. That mattered to me. She was scared, but she was not abstract about it. She said she didn't know exactly how she would do this, only that she did not want to pretend it was not happening. I was shaken. I was also her mother, so I did not lecture her, and I did not make her beg for help. I reached across the table, took her hand, and said, "We will figure out what comes next. You are not doing any of it alone." I watched her shoulders drop an inch, and that inch changed the whole room. Matt got home late that night, still wearing his work shoes, looking tired in the way only medical shifts can make a person look. I told Pamela I would tell him myself, so she would not have to relive the first hard moment twice in one day. He had barely set down his bag when I said we needed to talk. He saw my face and stopped trying to unbutton his coat. I told him plainly that Pamela was pregnant, that she had told me that afternoon, and that she was terrified of what he might say. He did not speak for about 3 seconds, which felt longer. Then he asked, "Is she okay?" Not, "How could this happen?" Not, "What was she thinking?" He asked if she was okay, whether she had seen a doctor yet, and whether she needed anything right away. When I told him she was upstairs and bracing for the worst, he went halfway up, then stopped and asked me, "Do you want me to go in, or does she need a minute?" That question almost made me cry. When Pamela finally came down, he hugged her first. I watched her face change in real time, fear loosening into something survivable. That was when we became a team instead of a crisis. About a week before Thanksgiving, Pamela and I had dinner at Teresa and William's house because they wanted to talk as a family. Matt was stuck at the hospital that night, and Teresa had acted as if waiting for him would only drag things out, which should have told me exactly what kind of evening she intended to have. Even before dessert, I could tell that phrase had been used as a trap. Their dining room always looked like a staged model home, candles lit, polished silver, everything arranged like good manners could substitute for warmth. Teresa kept her voice low at first, which somehow made it worse. She said she was deeply disappointed. William talked about choices and consequences in that legal, careful tone he used whenever he wanted cruelty to sound rational. Pamela listened with both hands in her lap and her jaw set tight. Then Teresa brought up Harriet, Matt's late grandmother, the woman who built most of the family money from a handful of properties and a level of stubbornness everybody else had turned into legend. "Harriet would have been ashamed," Teresa said, and she said it with satisfaction, as if she were reaching for the one name nobody was allowed to argue with. William followed her with talk about the family name, standards, and how some behavior was not supposed to be rewarded. I watched Pamela go from nervous to angry in one slow, visible shift. The evening had stopped pretending to be a discussion. The real point surfaced when Teresa and William moved from shame to money. Teresa said no one should assume that family support continued no matter what somebody chose to do. William said it more smoothly, as if he were explaining a policy. If Pamela insisted on keeping the baby, she should not count on being treated the same way when Harriet's estate was considered in the future. Pamela looked from one to the other and said, "What exactly are you threatening me with?" Teresa answered with words like values, legacy, and consequences, never once saying inheritance directly again because she knew she already had. William added that Harriet had created what she created for people who honored the family, not embarrassed it. That did it. Pamela sat up straight and said, very clearly, "You are not going to use money to make me ashamed of my own baby." I said, "And you are not going to talk to her like this while pretending it's guidance." The room went flat after that. Teresa told us we were being emotional. William said we would all regret making this adversarial. No one raised a voice. Nobody had to. By the time we left, the line had already been drawn, and everybody at that table knew it. When Mr. Whitaker called the morning after Thanksgiving, he did not start with condolences or explanation. He asked one question first.
Courtney,
He said,
before I say anything else, I need to confirm whether Pamela is pregnant.
His tone was careful in a way that made my stomach drop. I said yes, she was, and then I asked why he needed to know that. There was a small pause, paper moving on his end, and then he said it concerned provisions in Harriet's trust. Harriet was Matt's late grandmother, Pamela's great-grandmother, and by then I thought I knew exactly what that meant. Teresa and William had spent the last week wrapping shame and money around the same threat. Now the family lawyer was calling the morning after Thanksgiving to ask if the pregnancy was real.
Are they trying to cut her out?
I asked. He did not answer that directly. He said only that he needed to meet with us as soon as possible and would prefer to do it that afternoon or the next morning at the latest. He gave me a time, repeated the office address we knew, and said, "Please bring Pamela." After I hung up, I stood in my kitchen with the phone in my hand and felt sure we were walking into a formal version of the same rejection. Matt had gotten home and slept only a few hours when I told him everything at once. The lawyer's call, the trust, and exactly what his parents had done on Thanksgiving. I told him Teresa said our daughter was no longer family. William stood there, and they sent a pregnant girl out of the house to spend the holiday in her car. Matt sat on the edge of the bed, awake in a way I had not seen in years.
They did what?
He said, and I repeated it because I needed those words to belong to them, not to rumor. He picked up his phone before I finished. Teresa answered, and I heard him say, "If you can decide my daughter isn't family, then don't expect me to keep treating you like family either." She must have tried to turn it on him, because his face changed from fury to something colder.
Ashamed?
He said.
You threw your granddaughter out on Thanksgiving.
William got on the line and started talking about lessons, standards, and enabling bad choices. Matt cut him off.
You don't get to call cruelty a lesson,
he said. By the time he ended the call, there was nothing soft left in him. We went into Mr. Whitaker's office the way people walk into an appointment they already think they understand. Pamela sat between Matt and me in the waiting room with her hands locked together so tightly her thumbs went white. Mr. Whitaker, the family lawyer, came out himself and ushered us into the conference room with a file box already open on the table. He was older, formal, and not a man given to wasted motion. That morning he seemed unsettled anyway. He sat down, opened a folder, and said that before he explained anything about the trust, there was an item Harriet had directed to be delivered under very specific circumstances. Then he reached into the folder and handed Pamela a sealed envelope with Harriet's name written in a sharp, slanting hand across the front. Pamela looked at me, then at Matt, then broke the seal with one finger under the flap. I braced myself for something dry and cruel, one more message from the dead being used to control the living. Instead, as Pamela's eyes moved down the page, her whole face changed. She blinked once, looked back at the top as if checking she had read it right, and then handed the letter to Matt without saying a word. The room had turned, and none of us knew by how much. Harriet's letter was nothing like the version of her Teresa had used as a weapon. She wrote plainly, almost bluntly, that she had once been a very young woman carrying a child before she had security, before respectability, before the family liked to remember her story. She wrote that the hardest years of her life were exactly the years later generations polished away. One sentence made Pamela put her hand over her mouth. No girl in my line is ever to be cornered, shamed, or abandoned for carrying a child. Harriet said fear passes, gossip passes, and people who love rules more than people always claim they are protecting the family when really they are protecting their comfort. She said a baby is never a stain, and no one should be made to trade dignity for support. By the time Matt finished reading, there was not a single sentence in that letter that sounded anything like Teresa's warnings about legacy and standards. Pamela sat very still while tears ran down her face, not because the words were sentimental, but because they were practical and fierce in exactly the place she had been wounded. The woman they had invoked like a threat had built a door where they had tried to build a wall. Only after the letter did Mr. Whitaker explain the legal part, and it was so different from what we had feared that I had to make him repeat himself. Harriet's trust did not punish pregnancy. It protected against abandonment during pregnancy. There was a provision, he said, to activate support if a direct female descendant became pregnant young and chose to carry the child. Harriet had written it specifically to prevent exactly the kind of isolation, panic, and financial pressure Pamela was now facing. That support included funds and housing security on top of anything Pamela was entitled to receive. Pamela laughed once in disbelief, then apologized because it sounded impossible after the way Teresa and William had spoken. Mr. Whitaker did not look offended. He looked grim. He said Harriet had been explicit that money was not to be used as leverage against a young mother in the family.
"The clause exists to make sure she does not struggle alone," he said.
Pamela stared at him, then at the letter again. "So they knew?" she asked.
"They knew this and told me the opposite?"
Mr. Whitaker chose his words carefully and said he could not yet speak to what they knew or when they knew it. But the fact sat in the room anyway. Everything Teresa and William had framed as consequence might actually have been protection, and they had tried to weaponize the lie before we ever saw the paperwork. Then the meeting shifted again. Mr. Whitaker referred to the pregnancy support as being in addition to Pamela's regular distributions, and Pamela interrupted him with a confused frown. "What regular distributions?" she asked. He looked up from the file and said, "The distributions you began receiving at 18. She shook her head. "I never got anything." He seemed to think Matt and I had handled the money for her. We told him no. He flipped pages, asked whether checks had been sent elsewhere, whether there was an account in her name, and whether any educational payments had been made on her behalf. Up to that point, he said, the trustee's office had been certifying that routine distributions were being handled appropriately. Pamela's pregnancy had forced him to review the file more closely, and for the first time the paperwork and reality were no longer matching. Pamela answered no to all of it. According to the trust, funds should already have been distributed to her when she turned 18, and there appeared to be earlier educational support due before that. None of it had reached her. Mr. Whitaker took off his glasses, rubbed the bridge of his nose, and said he would have to investigate immediately. "Please understand," he said. "If what you are telling me is accurate, this is not a misunderstanding." We walked out of that office with one fear removed and a worse one settling into place. Teresa and William had not been defending Harriet's values. They may have been hiding money that was never theirs to control. The days after that first meeting moved faster than any family conflict I had ever seen, because once Mr. Whitaker stopped dealing in broad warnings and started dealing in records, everything changed shape. He called for past distributions, rental income statements, trustee decisions, expense logs, property management documents, and any communication tied to Pamela's share of Harriet's trust. He asked dates, signatures, account numbers. He sent short emails that sounded polite until you realized every sentence required an answer somebody might not want to give. For the first time, Teresa and William were not standing in a dining room speaking for the family. They were being asked to account for paperwork. That mattered. Moral superiority can survive almost anything. Missing transfers and unsigned authorizations cannot. Matt read each update with his jaw locked. Pamela kept asking whether she had somehow missed something obvious, whether a letter had gone to the wrong address, whether there was some innocent explanation. There could have been, in theory, but innocence does not usually require this much backtracking. By the third day, even Mr. Whitaker's voice had changed. He was no longer asking us to be patient while he clarified confusion. He was asking for patience while he verified what had already started to look very bad. Teresa and William came to our house 2 evenings later without calling first. I saw their sedan pull into the driveway and knew at once this was not a visit about reconciliation. Teresa stepped onto the porch already talking, pearls on, coat buttoned, as if formal clothes could make what they wanted seem reasonable. William stood beside her with that practiced look of injured authority. I did not invite them in right away, but they kept pressing, so Matt opened the door and let them stand just inside the entry. Teresa said the situation was getting out of hand, that lawyers were making everything uglier than it needed to be, and that families should handle family matters privately. William said Mr. Whitaker had overreacted to a simple misunderstanding. Then, because greed eventually makes people careless, they said the quiet part out loud. Teresa complained that it was absurd for Pamela to receive extra support just because she got pregnant. And in that moment, the moral argument finally dropped its mask. This was not about standards. It was about money they had already started treating as their own. William talked about properties being tied up, obligations to other branches of the family, rental income already allocated, plans already made. He said it as if Harriet's trust were a household budget they had kindly been stretching for everyone's benefit. Pamela was upstairs and could probably hear every word through the floorboards. That was when their motives stopped pretending to be principle. Matt did not yell. That would have given them something easy to dismiss. He stood in our foyer with one hand on the open door and answered them in the calmest voice I had heard from him all week. He said, "You did not treat my daughter like family when you threw her out on Thanksgiving and left her alone in her car, so you do not get to hide behind family now that paperwork is involved." Teresa tried the softer approach first, saying everyone had been emotional, that maybe words were chosen poorly, that Pamela had misunderstood. Matt did not move. "She understood perfectly," he said. William hardened again and said this was exactly what was wrong now. No consequences, no standards, no respect for the people who built anything. Matt looked at him and said, "What Harriet built is why this conversation is happening, and you've used her name to do the opposite of what she wanted." Then he made the line final. He told them we were not dropping anything because they had lied to our daughter, humiliated her, and tried to pressure her with money that was never theirs to weaponize. "After this," he said, "there are no more calls, no more visits, and no more pretending." He held the door wider, and they had to walk through it. At the follow-up meeting, Mr. Whitaker had numbers instead of suspicions. He laid them out one by one across the conference table, while Pamela listened with both hands flat on her knees, as if holding herself steady. Harriet's trust required a $25,000 distribution to Pamela at 18. It had not been paid. There was also $12,000 in earlier educational support that should have been used on her behalf over the years and had never been properly distributed. On top of that, Harriet's pregnancy clause now released another $85,000 in protected support to be paid in stages for Pamela and the baby. Then came the piece that explained why Teresa and William had fought so hard against the pregnancy becoming real in the paperwork. Harriet had designated one of the trust's rental properties to be made available to a young mother in exactly Pamela's position. Not eventually. Now. Once activated, the housing provision shifted control of that property away from discretionary management and toward Pamela's direct use. William had been collecting rent on that place. Teresa had been treating the arrangement like permanent family income. Suddenly, their objections about values made brutal financial sense. They were never defending legacy. They were defending control. The enforcement part took weeks, but it did happen, and I think that matters when people tell stories like this. Life rarely flips in one dramatic hour. It turns because paperwork keeps moving after the dramatic hour is over. Mr. Whitaker confirmed that Teresa and William were removed from key control as trustees once the records showed they had mishandled the trust and failed to make required distributions. They were ordered to account for what had been withheld and repay what could be traced. He told us they were personally liable to return the missing $37,000 that should have reached Pamela, and the trust would also recover rental income they had no right to keep once the property was reassigned under Harriet's housing provision. Pamela received the missed distributions, the newly triggered support, and access to the rental house Harriet had set aside decades earlier for a girl exactly like her. That was the deepest part of it for me. The family story used to shame her turned out to have been built to protect her all along. Matt followed through on everything he said in the foyer. He blocked their numbers, stopped answering messages, and went fully no contact. They had tried to keep power by closing a door on our daughter. Instead, they lost every door they had mistaken for ownership. A few months later, the house Harriet had set aside no longer felt like a legal outcome. It felt like Pamela's place. There was a bassinet in the corner of the bedroom, folded laundry on the sofa, and a whiteboard on the fridge with feeding times, pediatric appointments, and a list of classes she wanted to take once the baby settled into more predictable sleep. Our grandson arrived healthy and uninterested in the family mythology that had nearly swallowed his mother whole. Pamela was tired. She was steadier than I had seen since that kitchen conversation. Tyler was not her partner anymore, but he showed up, learned, and did the awkward work of becoming a young father instead of disappearing. With the support finally in place, Pamela could breathe long enough to plan again. Becoming a teacher was not gone. It had just taken a different road. Teresa and William lost the control they were desperate to protect, and Harriet's wishes won without anybody needing to scream, so I still wonder what other people think. Did we do the right thing by forcing the trust to follow Harriet's wishes and cutting them off when they lied, or were they right that bad choices should have consequences? Tell me in the comments and subscribe for more. A week before my wedding, my dad was laughing while he installed a hidden camera in my fiancé's car. 2 days later, I hit play and blew up my own life in one evening. Sometimes I think it wasn't me who canceled that wedding. It was a little black box under the dashboard. My name is Natalie. I'm 31. I live just outside Houston, in a studio my parents bought for us to start family life in. There is no family. The studio went to me and my anxiety. My parents are Elaine and Michael Harrington. My dad is that guy who started with a used pickup and a couple of warehouse contacts and now owns a logistics company. Trucks, containers, rail shipments. My mom is a retired one-woman band who now boils strawberry jam in the backyard while running the company's marketing on her laptop. We also have a St. Bernard named Duke who is genuinely convinced he's their third child and that the deed to the house is in his name. I was raised on the classic American dream template. Good school, decent college, no early pregnancy, no criminal record, please and thank you. My mom used to say, "You can do whatever you want, with a degree, a ring, and health insurance." My dad would add, "And a prenup," and laugh. Only I knew he was about half kidding. Before Brandon, I had 3 almost serious relationships that could be turned into a handbook called How Not To. Guy number 1 was a creative soul who loved my kindness and my credit card equally. Guy number 2 was a shiny lawyer who once said, "We'll keep our finances separate. Your parents are rich. I've still got a mortgage." Guy number 3 occasionally showed up with tiny kids' shoes in his trunk and insisted, "Oh, that's just my nephew sometimes." After guy number 3, my mom sat across from me, put down 2 bowls of ice cream and said, "Let's be honest. You have terrible taste in men. We'll pretend we understand. You'll pretend you're going to ask our opinion." I promised that next time I'd bring home someone normal. Enter Brandon. Brandon literally drove into my life, at a gas station. I was standing by the pump, arguing with the payment app, looking like a boiled shrimp, red, sticky, and pissed off. My phone was flashing yet another text. "Sorry, can't make it tonight. Something urgent came up." Another Prince. "Need a hand?" I heard behind me. I turned. Tall guy, tank top, gym shorts, tan skin. That calm kind of smile you only get when your most urgent business in life is topping off your tire pressure. "Only if you're a therapist," I said, "and you can rewrite my entire life." "Therapy's not really my field," he smirked, "but I can fill your tank." 10 minutes later, my car had gas, the app was defeated, and I already knew his name was Brandon, that he was a trainer at a regular gym not far from my office, and that he didn't have any urgent plans right then. A month later, we were texting every day. I found out he grew up in a rougher neighborhood with parents who were more committed to alcohol than to each other, that he joined the army because I had to get out of there somehow, and after his service, he went back to school, got certified, and got a job as a trainer. He wasn't a millionaire, a genius, or a rock star. He was just normal. A grown man who woke up in the morning, went to work, and didn't whine about it. That's what got me. Our first dinner at my parents' house looked like they were rehearsing for a senator's visit. Mom pulled out the good china. Dad sat at the head of the table like the CEO of his own life, and Duke sniffed Brandon like he was deliberating his verdict. "So, you're a trainer," Dad said. "Yes, sir," Brandon answered calmly. "And your plans?" "Work, grow, save up for a down payment on a house. Maybe open my own gym one day." Dad nodded like he had 3 spreadsheets open in his head. Then came the big question. "Do you have debt?" Brandon was honest. Small student loan, car payment. After dinner, Mom told me, "He's good. Really good. But it's not going to be easy for you too." Dad added, "If he loves you, let him show he can take responsibility." A year later, Brandon proposed, with candles, a dinner, and my ugly, happy crying. Dad shook his hand. "Welcome to the family, son." My parents bought us a small studio closer to downtown, a nearly new car in my name, and covered a big chunk of the wedding budget. Brandon was tortured by this. "I don't want to live off your parents," he kept saying. "I don't want it to feel like I'm getting everything handed to me." Dad said, "We're going to spend this money anyway. Better on you two than on Duke. He already thinks he owns the place." Mom just kept repeating, "The only thing that matters is honesty and loyalty. The rest we can figure out." I listened and nodded because I truly believed I'd found a man who was all of that. Or so I thought. A week before the wedding, we went up to my parents' place for a barbecue. Final details, mood boards, playlists, the whole circus. Mom was making a salad and yelling at me for being too nervous. Duke was chasing a green ball like national security depended on it. "Natalie, go see where your father disappeared to," Mom said. "He vanished again like our property tax bill." I went looking. Office, empty. Wine cellar, empty. Garage, light on. I peeked in and found my dad on his knees by the front bumper of Brandon's car. In his hands, a little black box, a laptop, a mess of cables. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Planting explosives in the wedding gift?" "Relax," Dad grunted without looking up. "It's just a camera, same ones we put on all our trucks." "You're installing a hidden camera in my fiancé's car," I said slowly. "You do hear yourself, right?" He straightened up and sighed. "Natalie, I have lived way too many years in a world where people smile at you and then throw you under the bus," he said. "I'm used to checking, not trusting." "Then just talk to him," I said. "Ask him straight." "And say what? Hey there, son, you're definitely not cheating on my daughter, right?" Dad snorted. "Do you know what every man will answer? No. Even if he's on his way to see someone else." Everything in me bristled. "This is an invasion," I said. "This is protection," he shot back. "If I'm wrong, I'll buy him an expensive bottle and apologize. If I'm right, you won't be left with a baby and a mortgage and a guy who lied the whole time." He snapped the panel back into place, hid the camera, tested the remote connection. "At least turn the audio off," I said. "The video will be more than enough." "Fine," he sighed. "Video only." I probably should have blown up right then. Instead, I said, "If it turns out he's clean, you tell him about this yourself. You don't put that on me." "I promise," Dad said. Too bad we never got that far. 2 days before the wedding, Brandon told me he had to drive out of town for work, meet some guy about a new contract for the gym. I was deep in wedding prep hell. Nails, brows, dress fitting, all the stuff that looks fun only in Pinterest boards. He came back late, exhausted. "You okay?" I asked. "Yeah, just a long day," he said, and went to shower. He was asleep within minutes. I wasn't. The camera was buzzing at the back of my mind. So were the things he hadn't told me. And my dad's words about protection. After an hour of staring at the ceiling, I got up, went down to the garage, opened the app on Dad's laptop. At first it was boring. Free therapy for an anxious bride. Highway, traffic, gas station. Brandon singing along to the radio. I almost closed the laptop and told myself to grow up. Then I saw the sign. 1-story buildings, ramps, people in wheelchairs. A nurse came out with a young woman in a chair. Thin, drowned in an oversized gray hoodie. Brandon practically jumped out of the car, grinned at her, scooped her up like she was made of glass, moved her to the passenger seat, buckled her in carefully. They pulled out onto the road. Fields, tree lines, some ancient gas station, a lake, a picnic area. Brandon spread out a blanket, carried her out, sat her down, unpacked food, juice. The camera was at a slight angle, but I could see enough. They were laughing. He brushed her hair back. She leaned her head on his shoulder. Then they laid down on the blanket. She rested her head on his chest. He wrapped his arm around her. Something inside me just snapped. On the drive back to the center, the window must have been cracked, and even with the audio off, the mic caught a few lines. "Brandon, I'm scared." Her voice. "What if I can't do this?" "I'm here, Liv." His. "We're going to raise our baby. I don't care what the doctors say." We're going to raise our baby. I hit pause. Sat there for a full minute, just breathing, trying not to throw the laptop across the garage. My fiancé, the man I was supposed to stand next to in church in 48 hours, was taking some woman out of a long-term care facility and promising to raise their baby. I finished the video. He carried her back in his arms. The nurse nodded at him like they were old friends. He sat in the car for a moment, forehead on the steering wheel, then started the engine and left. The file ended. So did my old life, pretty much. I went back upstairs, flipped the light on. Brandon stirred. "Natalie?" I dropped the laptop on the bed next to him. "Watch this," I said. "Rehearsal for your future family life." He watched. I watched his face. He tensed at the Green Oaks sign, turned pale at the picnic, closed his eyes at our baby. "What is this?" he asked quietly. "A camera," I said. "My dad's. In your car." He was silent for a few seconds. "So you and your dad decided to spy on me?" "We decided to find out the truth," I snapped. "You decided to build a second family." "That's not what's happening," he said. Classic line. "Really?" I laughed. "You drive out to a long-term care center, pick up a woman everyone there clearly knows you with, lie on a blanket with her, and promise to raise a baby. How else am I supposed to see it?" He rubbed his face. "She's my sister," Brandon said. "Nat, give me a minute. I'll explain everything." "Your sister, sure." I cut him off. "And the baby is also magically your sister's. And you're just... what? A saint?" I wasn't listening. At that point, I was pure anger in leggings. Brandon looked at me for a long moment. "I can see you've already decided," he said quietly. "It doesn't matter what I say. You're going to believe whatever the video tells you." He stood up, opened the closet, started packing. "You're seriously just gonna walk out?" I asked. "You're not even going to try?" "I am trying," he said, not looking back. "Trying to talk to someone who throws a recording in my face but doesn't ask a single question." He grabbed a bag, his wallet, his keys. "There's not going to be a wedding," I said. "I got that." He nodded. The door shut behind him, and that was it. My future husband turned back into just a guy with a backpack walking out of my life. The next day, I called everyone who needed calling: restaurant, church, florist, photographer, saying, "The wedding is canceled 20 times in a row" is a very specific form of torture. I told my mom, "He cheated on me." She cried, hugged me, kept saying it was for the best. I handed my dad the camera. He watched the recording, came back, braced his hands on the table, and only asked, "Are you sure you want to call everything off?" "It's already done," I said. He nodded. Looked less like the guy who'd caught the bastard, and more like a man who'd dug for oil and found a toxic waste dump underneath. Brandon didn't text, didn't call, didn't try to explain. At the time, I called it cowardice. Now, it's not that simple. I moved back into our studio, alone. Everything in that apartment screamed that there should be 2 of us, 2 Mr. and Mrs. Muggs, 2 toothbrushes, half a closet sitting empty and judging me. My friends split into 2 camps. Team 1, better now than after 2 kids. Team 2, what a jerk, not even trying to talk. I agreed with both teams, depending on the day. I changed my route to avoid driving past his gym. Didn't look at his socials, first out of principle, then out of sheer fear. Once, in a grocery store parking lot, I almost ran into him. I saw his back, his walk, a stroller next to him. A real one, with an actual baby in it. I grabbed the steering wheel like it could save my life, stalled the engine, and by the time I got it started again, they were gone. I didn't sleep properly for 3 nights. All I could see when I closed my eyes was Brandon, the woman from the car, and that stroller, and yes, I hated him, and myself. Now here's what I didn't know back then, and what you already know I'm going to find out. Brandon spent his whole life believing he was an only child. Until one night, an old neighbor lady, in the middle of his parents' drunken argument, asked his mom, "How's your little girl doing? The one in that place?" Joyce tried to laugh it off, blame confusion and old age, but alcohol makes some tongues looser than they should be. That night, Brandon dragged the truth out of them. He had a twin sister, Olivia, born the same day, but with a severe autoimmune joint disease, brought up on pain, surgeries, and a prognosis that basically said, life in a wheelchair, constant care, endless meds. Jean and Joyce were young, broke, and very tired. They picked the easiest route, signed away their parental rights, handed the baby over to the system, and decided that it's better this way for everyone. For Brandon, forgetting was trickier. When he found out, he was in his early 20s. He moved out quietly, without hitting anyone, which frankly was impressive. Then he started looking for his sister through social services, archives, bureaucratic hell, and a couple of rare kind people in the right places. Eventually, he found Olivia at Green Oaks, that same long-term care facility I later saw through my dad's camera. She was sitting by the window with a book in her hands. He walked in and said,
"Hey, I'm Brandon. We were born on the same day."
She glanced at him, smirked. "Is this a new therapy? Entertain patients with fairy tales?" He showed her his papers, birth certificate, documents, proof. She listened and asked, "So they didn't lose me. They gave me away. Officially." And then she just nodded, like she was filing it away under confirmed suspicion. Brandon started visiting every week, sometimes twice. He brought real food, not the stuff in plastic trays, books, managed to get her a decent mattress through a charity. And he heard story after story about people the system took care of, just enough to keep breathing, but not enough to live. Green Oaks had a resident doctor named Oliver, young, ambitious, and just a bit too in love with his own research. He came up with a social integration experiment. Take Olivia out to a restaurant and see how she copes with the real world. She wanted it. Badly. Brandon had doubts, but she begged, and he gave in. Bright lights, noise, tables packed too close together, bathroom at the other end of the room. Dinner out was a full-blown boss level for Olivia. By the end, she could barely stand. Oliver drove her to his place to rest because the center was far and she was already half asleep. And then, textbook How to Wreck Your Medical License. He helped her lie down, gave her some water, sat on the bed for just a minute, and fell asleep. They woke up no longer in doctor-patient positions. A few weeks later, Olivia found out she was pregnant. Her primary doctor, not Oliver, looked at the test results and went pale. "Olivia, this is a huge risk. Your condition, your meds, the joint damage. Pregnancy is an enormous strain. I'm obligated to list all the possible complications." And he did, up to the word death. She listened. Then she called Brandon. "I'm pregnant," she said. "Everyone thinks this is insane." Brandon came the same day, sat on the edge of her bed, held her hand in silence for a long time. Then he said, "I'm not going to pressure you either way, but if you keep this baby, I'm with you. I'm not letting the system take another person from our family." That was the moment my dad's camera later sliced into one line, "We're going to raise our baby," and played back to me without any context. Dr. Oliver, meanwhile, transferred to another facility at lightning speed. He was terrified. Patient, pregnancy, potential scandal, loss of license. Olivia didn't file a complaint. No resources, no strength, no desire to go to war with the system when she could barely breathe and had a baby growing inside her. Brandon found a charity to help with her treatment bills, helped her get disability and assistance, helped her move into a small, accessible ground-floor apartment. He worked extra shifts at the gym, said no to himself, and said yes to diapers and a crib. And at the same time, he was planning a wedding with me, trying to find the words to tell me everything, waiting for the right moment that never came. That's where my dad's camera came in and finished the job for all of us. Olivia had the baby, a boy, Noah. The pregnancy nearly killed her, but it didn't. Both of them survived. Brandon turned into a one-man support service. Groceries, baths, doctors, paperwork. Rocking Noah at 3 a.m. while Olivia lay there bargaining with her joints not to fall apart. One night he came over with a small velvet box.
"Hide this for me," he asked. "I can't throw it away, and I don't want to see it."
He didn't explain. She didn't push. Months later, looking for a clean cloth diaper, she stumbled across the box, opened it. Inside was a thin white gold bracelet with a small pendant in the shape of an N. On the inside engraved, "For my wife Natalie." Olivia stared at it for a long time, at the word wife. That evening she asked,
"Who's Natalie?"
Brandon sat down.
"My fiancée," he said. "Was. Why was?" "Because I kept my mouth shut for too long," he said. "She saw a piece of the truth and decided she knew the whole thing. I didn't get to explain. Or maybe I didn't have the guts."
Olivia is not big on drama, but even she decided this was too much. She looked up Elaine Harrington, Houston, Texas, found the company website, the address. Then she asked Dr. Oliver, who still sometimes gave her rides to appointments, for a ride to see one woman. He told her it was a terrible idea. Then he looked at Noah and agreed to go. That day I was in the office, writing some cheesy line about careful delivery across the country. The only thing being carefully delivered inside me was anxiety. My mom was at home, stirring her strawberry jam. Duke was guarding the pot from the local gang of crows. The gate buzzer rang. On the driveway, a car pulled up. At the wheel, a guy in a wrinkled doctor's coat. In the passenger seat, a woman in a wheelchair with a baby on her lap. Duke flew over, barking and trying to climb into her lap. "Duke, down!" Mom yelled. "It's okay," the woman smiled. "I'm used to pushy men." "Are you Elaine Harrington?" she asked. "Natalie's mom?" "Yes," Mom said slowly. "And you are?" "My name is Olivia," the woman said calmly. "Brandon is my twin brother, and this is Noah, his nephew. We need to talk." Mom later told me everything inside her went cold at that moment. The word mistress didn't exactly leave the chat. They rolled up onto the porch. Dr. Oliver parked himself in the shade like a human exhibit of guilty conscience. Olivia started talking. No tears, no theatrics. She told Mom about being given up to the system, about life in that facility, about Brandon showing up one day and introducing himself as her brother, about Oliver's experiment, the restaurant, the night he shouldn't have allowed to happen, the pregnancy, about doctors begging her not to keep the baby, about Brandon carrying her up and down stairs and fighting for funding. Mom listened and slowly realized the puzzle was from a completely different box. Then Olivia got to the day at the lake. "Brandon just wanted me to have one good memory of being pregnant," she said. "One that didn't involve hospital lights. That's why he took me to the water. We lay on the blanket and he said, 'We're going to raise our baby.' Not because we're a couple, because he didn't want Noah to grow up in the same hell I did." Then she pulled out the bracelet. "This is yours," she said, sliding the velvet box across the table. "You can throw it out, keep it, melt it down. I don't care. But I think your daughter and my brother got their chance to talk stolen from them, and I'm part of why." Mom looked at the bracelet with the little N, at Noah playing with Duke's ear, at the woman in the wheelchair who had come not to beg for sympathy, but to try to fix something she didn't even break. And she said, My husband and I have tried very hard to protect our daughter. Apparently, at some point, we started protecting our own fears instead. She took a deep breath. Natalie's coming by today. I want you to stay. And I'm going to call Brandon. I drove over to my parents just because I suddenly wanted my mom's coffee and some quiet. I pulled into the driveway. Duke was doing his usual tornado impression. On the porch, I saw my mom, the guy in glasses I vaguely recognized as a doctor from some charity visit to Green Oaks, and a woman in a wheelchair with a baby on her lap. I knew her immediately. It was her, the woman from the video, except not pixelated. Real. My first thought was, well, at least his mistress is pretty. Yeah, my brain is not my best friend. Mom got up. Natalie, come here, she said. We need to talk. I sat. She put a mug of coffee in front of me. My hands shook so much I almost spilled it. This is Olivia, Mom said. Brandon's sister. And this is Noah. Olivia looked me straight in the eye. I'm pretty sure I'm the reason you called off your wedding, she said calmly. Can I at least give you my version of that recording? I nodded. Where was I going to go? She told me what you already know. I didn't. With every section, my stomach twisted tighter, not because of Olivia, because of me. At some point, Noah reached for me. I automatically took him. He was heavy, warm, smelled like milk and baby shampoo, a whole little person who existed because one man once refused to repeat his parents' cowardice. Brandon should have told you sooner, Olivia said honestly. He's an idiot. I'm not excusing his silence. And your dad shouldn't have planted that camera, and you shouldn't have made up your mind off a single video, but we all did what we did. And I shouldn't have tried to control everything with gadgets, Mom added quietly, or pushed you with my fear. Duke lay down across my feet like a very large, very furry emotional support animal. Mom put her hand over mine. I called Brandon, she said. Told him I want to see him this weekend. Here. With you. With Olivia and Noah. No pressure. Just to talk. And? I managed to get out. He said he'd think about it, she answered. But from his voice, I think he's coming. Olivia smiled sideways. He's stubborn, she said. But when it comes to people he loves, he shows up, even if he growls the whole time. I sat there with Noah on my lap, looking at the bracelet on the table, and realized that the person who hit play and decided she knew everything, that was me. Dad put the camera in. Brandon kept his mouth shut. But I'm the one who slammed the door on the wedding. Right now the bracelet is on my nightstand. Duke curls up next to the bed and sighs like some old philosopher. Brandon hasn't called yet. The weekend's still ahead. I don't know if he'll show up, and if he does, I honestly don't know what I'll say first. I'm sorry, or you're not innocent either. Probably both. So here's my question to you, since you've listened this far. If a man stays silent about the ugliest, most painful part of his life because he's terrified of losing you, but at the same time he's carrying someone else's fate on his shoulders and he's not actually lying to your face, is he a jerk? Or just a broken person who doesn't know how to do better yet? And me, the woman who watched one video, asked 0 questions, and canceled her wedding 48 hours before the altar. Did I destroy everything beyond repair? Or is there still something here that can be put back together? What would you do in my place? Give this story a second chance, or close the laptop, walk away, and build a life where there's no Brandon at all. Let me know in the comments and subscribe for more.